Well, hi everybody, and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History. I hope you are all doing well, staying safe and sane as we go through this coronavirus crisis. I promised I would drop more episodes to help us through our isolation and maybe put a smile on your faces. And here is a little one in a series I have running on the channel called Just for Fun, where I do things just for fun. And in this episode, I want to talk about my favorite fashionable Floridians. If you're new to the channel and wonder who I am, my name's Amanda Halley, and I'm a fashion historian and a Floridian. I know what you're all thinking. Amanda, you're not a Floridian, but I really am. At least I consider myself one, and I will explain why in a second. You see the picture of me here? This is how I usually dress this time of year, because this time of year I'm usually in Florida. It's when I make my Florida jaunt, but of course can't do it this year, can we? So I thought I'd bring a little bit of Floridian spirit into my own life and hopefully yours with this episode. And as it doesn't seem like I'll visit the Mai Kai anytime soon, I'm going to pour myself a massive tiki cocktail as I narrate this episode. Anyway, I know that we are not the only ones who had to cancel our vacations, but you know what? That is nothing, absolutely nothing compared to those of you who have been let off work, temporarily sent home. This is awful. To add a financial burden to the rest of it is just horrible. And I know that we're all feeling anxious and frustrated. And so let's just take a few minutes to have a little mini vacation together. But first, let's answer that question. Amanda Halley, how can you be a Floridian? Well, this is how. I was born in Ohio, but then when I was a toddler, my American father and English mother moved back to England. I spent my early childhood in England, hence the accent. I guess that's where I learned to talk. But then, when I was about 12, we moved back to America, and I grew up in beautiful Boca Raton. I'm a Boca girl. I'm a Boca girl. Can you believe it? I did all of my high school at the now defunct Boca Raton Academy. And there I am in Mrs. Palladino's French class. Sitting next to me is a girl called Bailey. I think her name was Bailey. And look at our outfits. We are so obviously working that early 1980s adventure trend that was so popular. I tell you, I am a Floridian. I grew up shopping at Burdines, and only Floridians know Burdines. I still think Publix is the greatest grocery store that ever was or ever could be. My very first job when I was 14 years old was at the Denny's in Boca Raton, only it wasn't called Denny's then, it was called something else, a chain with a very unfortunate name. I then left Denny's when I was about 16 and graduated to a job at the newly opened Town Center Mall. I'm a Floridian, I'm telling you. The last 40 years of my mother's life was spent in Florida as well, mostly in beautiful Mount Dora, so I always visited her there. My sisters live in Orlando, on the outskirts of Orlando. My brother lives in Deerfield Beach. Seriously, for me, home is Florida. I took this picture last year, one evening when Rupert and I were having dinner on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, and it made me feel so homesick. So what I thought I'd do is a little episode where I talk about some favorite fashionable Floridians. Of course, this is a completely subjective list, and my definition of a Floridian is this: somebody who was born in Florida, somebody who made Florida their home to such an extent that they impacted the cultural fiber of the state, and also some fictional Floridians. All right, who's up first? Born in Bascom, Florida, 5 miles from the Alabama border, It still makes her a Florida girl, whether she likes it or not, Faye Dunaway. Although by all accounts she's madder than a box of frogs today, there was a time when Faye was a genuine fashion trendsetter, be it with her Bonnie and Clyde wardrobe that genuinely helped get women out of the miniskirts and into the slinky midi, or what about her go-getter career girl look here in Network, with those wonderful billowing blouses and calf-length skirts. In Chinatown, she actually started a trend for jodhpurs. This impossible diva certainly seems tough to work with, but I just can't stay mad at her for long. Who's our next favorite fashionable Floridian? Gianni Versace. No, of course he wasn't born in Florida, but he made Miami his home, and what a home. His Casa Casarina is a jewel of Mediterranean revival style. Built in 1930, Versace restored it to its former glory while adding his own incredible Versacean touches. A lot of people describe it as looking like an Italian villa, but really, I think it looks like Mediterranean revival style, which was supposed to look like Italian Mediterranean villas. Today, the Versace house is a boutique hotel where you can spend a fortune to sleep in one of these beautiful rooms. Gianni Versace really helped solidify Miami's image as a luxury glamour capital, so he's included in this list. And oh look! There's a picture of my dad, David Wolfe, with Versace at some point in the mid-1970s. My dad's on the right, and no, it doesn't count as name-dropping if it's once removed, right? Who's next? Well, here's a clue. He was an American boy, born in Gainesville. Yes, it's lovely Tom Petty. I always loved Tom Petty's look, his long, blonde, flowing hair, his top hats, his scarves, his waistcoats, his snakeskin boots. He arrived at his signature look very early in his career, and he more or less stuck with it. I love Tom Petty's style. Who's next? Well, speaking of Mediterranean revival style, this guy has to be on the list, right? Addison Mizner, the architect and designer who really created that South Florida Mediterranean vibe. This glorious mix of Italian Renaissance and medieval Gothic and Moorish, all put together in a way that is so Floridian. Addison Meisner had an extraordinary life, and will you allow me just to do one little shill here? You know my husband's publishing company, Dean Street Press. We are the sole publishers of Addison Meisner's autobiography, The Many Meisners. It is such an exciting romp. I'll leave the link to it in case you want to purchase. I almost just said, what else are we into? But that's a different series running here on the channel. Who is our next fashionable Floridian? Well, it's a fictional fashionable Floridian. From the Miami set TV show Dexter, I give you Lieutenant Maria LaGuerta. We love the way that Lieutenant LaGuerta dresses. I call it business tropical. All of these wild tropical prints and bright colors and these fabulously fitted suits and all of that statement jewelry and her double pierced ears. We are just obsessed with Lieutenant LaGuerta. Who's up next? Well, you get two fashionable Floridians for the price of one this time, with Frederick Bartlett and his wife Evelyn, and unfortunately I cannot seem to locate a photograph of Evelyn. But those of you who watch what we're into will remember that last March I told you about our visit to Bonnet House in Fort Lauderdale, the Bartlett family home, again in that Mediterranean revival style, but so much more. They spent their lifetime redoing their house and adding to it. They were both artists, and the end result is this incredibly colourful, eclectic and quite fabulous interior and garden concept. They would go around the world collecting things, for example, doors from defunct palaces, metalwork from Mexico, carved cats from India, We loved this place. It was so inspiring. And if they're not fashionable Floridians, who is? Who's next? Let's venture into the unknown with our next fashionable Floridian. This guy, and what a fabulously creepy picture. He was called Edward Leedskalnin, and he was a very interesting and mysterious man. I'm sure some of you know all about him. He was the guy who created the Coral Castle, this extraordinary rock garden with stones that weigh tons and tons. Yet, nobody ever saw him move these gigantic pieces of rock, and nobody knows how he did it. All we know is that he had this, a sort of pulley with chains made of Florida pine. And Florida pine is not very strong, but you'll notice at the top there's a little black box that he would never, ever let anybody see inside of. Edward maintained that he knew the secret of anti-gravity and that he was the only man on Earth who knew how the pyramids were built. Where did he get this knowledge? Well, Giorgio says he probably got it from aliens. I'm not so sure, but I do think it's a mystery. And you're probably thinking, Amanda, you said this was fashionable Floridians. The Coral Castle is cool. Why is it fashionable? Well, I happen to think that his sculptures were chic. Très chic, in fact. Look at that Saturn. Look at those half moons. I think it's fabulous. Who's up next? Another fictional Floridian. She may have been born in Georgia, but this lady made Miami and the men of Miami her own personal killing fields. Yes, from the Golden Girls, it's Blanche Devereaux. I always loved her style. Her wardrobe in the show was great, from her statement outfits to her tight-fitting, sexy little suits, and of course her peignoirs, her Deverobes, as her fans called them. So much of her wardrobe worked in these wonderful South Beach corals. In fact, I love all of the wardrobe in the Golden Girls, and there is an ultimate fashion history on the costumes in the Golden Girls and why people get them wrong and don't understand them in the way that they should, in my opinion. Who's next? Well, come on, shake your body, baby, do the conga with glorious Gloria Estefan. She was fantastic in the 80s and even more fantastic now. I love Gloria Estefan. Who's next? Let's head down to Key West and go marlin fishing with alpha male par excellence, Ernest Hemingway. He had style. Ernest worked that adventure trend before it was a fashion trend, when people dressed this way because they were actually having adventures. His home in Key West is one of my favorite places to visit, not least of all because of the 99 gazillion cats there. As you all know, cats with extra toes are called Hemingway cats because the cats in Key West, they all have extra toes, and so does Bo, my new kitten. He's a Hemingway cat. He has extra toes. But he is not a fashionable Floridian, only by extension. Who's up next? Well, those of you who know me or watch the channel regularly will know that the next lady is going to be on this list, right? Lovely Lilly Pulitzer. Of course, how could she not be? She made Palm Beach her permanent home. Not only changed the landscape of the fashion scene in Palm Beach with her colorfully printed, easy-to-wear sleeveless shift dresses, she really changed the vibe of society at play, from being formal and stuffy to being relaxed and artistic, bare feet and all. I love Lilly Pulitzer. If I had to choose the number one Floridian fashion influencer, I have to again turn to fiction. Don Johnson as Sonny Crockett in Miami Vice of the 1980s. In Miami Vice, Sonny Crockett and his sidekick Tubbs really did inform men's fashion in the 1980s. Everyone suddenly wanted to dress like a South Florida cop with these big Armani suits in soft pastel colors. It was extraordinary the impact that Don Johnson had on men's fashion. I couldn't find a picture, but you remember how Sonny Crockett used to push the sleeves of his suit jackets up to his elbows? That became such a hot trend. And I just remembered something. In the 1980s, at the height of Don Johnson mania, everybody said, oh yes, he's very handsome, but he's not going to age well. He's got one of those very delicate, pretty faces that won't age well. Don Johnson is 70 now. And he's so handsome. We were all wrong. I think he's even handsomer than in his Miami Vice days. Why is Don Johnson so handsome? Why is Don Johnson so handsome? And on that point, I will say, I hope you enjoyed our little 10 minutes in Florida together. I don't do comments here, it's too overwhelming, but head over and join us on Facebook, the Ultimate Fashion History group on Facebook. And of course, you can subscribe to the channel because I will be back with more, maybe more sensible things. You can contact me through my website, and stay safe, stay sane, and as always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.